Indeed, indeed, indeed. Today is Friday, February the 23rd, 2018. We are going to continue with our... Indeed, indeed, indeed. Today. Alright, so I was just doing an audio test there. We are going to continue today. Welcome to Sapiostream, everybody. Sorry about that. My name is Sydney Winston. Also known as Ask an Atheist. I have two YouTube channels. Sydney Winston is the one to go to. It's this one here, obviously, you're watching. We're going to continue today with my tribute to Thunderf00t and his excellent series on why do people laugh at creationists. There are 47 segments to the series, 47 episodes. None of them are longer than about 10 minutes. I have been slowly making my way through them chronologically, sequentially. Out of 47, we have done 40. So today we carry on or continue with number 41. All videos are made by the genius Thunderf00t. And to you, sir, I salute. I don't see any reason whatsoever to wait around when we could be watching Thunderf00t's stuff, right? So why don't we just sort of get into it?
So early in 2014, Ken Ham had a debate with Bill Nye, the science guy. And in that, Ken Ham made some remarkable claims.
As a creationist, I maintain that observational science actually confirms this model based on the Bible.
Really? So observational science is going to confirm the biblical worldview? Oh dear. You must know by now, this is going to be fact-checked. And the results are going to be hilarious. So let's summarize the creationist model based on the Bible.
By creation, we mean, here at Answers in Genesis and the Creation Museum, we mean the account based on the Bible. Yes, I take Genesis as literal history, as Jesus did. When we look at that, what I call the 7 C's of history that we walk people through here at the museum.
That the universe was created about 6,000 years ago, and then about 4,000 years ago, there was Noah's flood, which caused this genetic bottleneck of the 2 to 10 canids that got on the ark. Somewhat depending on whether you think that dogs are clean or unclean animals.
As a creationist, I maintain that observational science actually confirms this model based on the Bible. Scientists working at the University of California stated this: we provide several lines of evidence supporting a single origin for dogs, and they put this diagram in the paper. By the way, that diagram is very, very similar to this diagram that creationists proposed based upon the creation account in Genesis.
Really, Ken, you sure about that? You really, really sure about that? Right, so firstly, what the hell's that on the left of the diagram? The golden jackal. Apparently, Noah's flood had no effect whatsoever on their population. That is, they were utterly impervious to God's attempts to destroy everything by a flood. Maybe they had iron chariots. You know, like the ones the people from the plains used to defeat God. In Judges, chapter 1, the Lord was with the men of Judah. They took possession of the hill country, but they were unable to drive the people from the plains because they had chariots fitted with iron. Seriously, iron chariots can stop God in the Bible. So some might say that that alone would be enough to show that the Bible is wrong about Noah's flood. That is, the Bible is not inerrant. You see, it's quite simple to show that something's not inerrant because you only have to show one error in it. But that would be too easy. There's more. You see, you might be wondering why all those lines are so broad in this scientific paper. Well, from the genetics, you can sort of get an estimate of the population size. Set your sides on laughter, because it turns out that from the genetics, they say that this genetic bottleneck wasn't 2 canids, as it says in the Bible, but somewhere between 2 and 25,000. Again, Ken, I'm really not sure that that's compatible with the Bible.
And then you start to realise Noah didn't need anywhere near the number of animals on the ark that people think he did. He didn't need all the species of dogs, only 2. As a creationist, I maintain that observational science actually confirms this model based on the Bible.
Well, okay, maybe Noah wasn't that good at counting and maybe mistakenly took about 10,000 dogs on the ark instead of a couple. Or perhaps the pre-flood wolves were much cleverer and they decided to spend their times making really clever disguises so that they could get on the ark. You know, all the golden jackals were making their own flood evasion plans. Then, of course, there's the time scale. Ken thinks that all of this happened some 4,000 years ago, while the genetics say it happened some 15,000 years ago, with the divergence of these canons happening some 400,000 years ago. In fact, if you're wondering whether the diagram looks like this at all, it's actually fairly common. So let's say that I've got a favourable set of genes in a very large population of, I don't know, say 10,000 or something, and depending on the selective pressure and how quickly the animal reproduces, it will take many generations for those genes to propagate throughout the population. Meanwhile, if your population is very small, those favourable genes can spread throughout the whole population much more quickly. So you have this irony that large populations tend to change genetically only very slowly, and it's when the species is at its smallest, that is when it's closest to extinction, that you have the most potential for rapid changes in the gene pool. And this property of animal populations is one of the basic ideas behind punctuated equilibrium. Anyways, so getting back to Ken, in summary, just with the dogs, your biblical account is off by a factor of 1,000 on the population size of the genetic bottleneck.
The Bible got it right about biology.
You're off by a factor of 100 on the time scale.
The Bible got it right about biology. Wow.
And then, of course, there's the minor point that the golden jackals were apparently impervious to Noah's flood.
The Bible got it right about biology. Wow. Because it really is the Word of God. Now, you're getting more excited about being a Christian?
But if you ignore all the parts that are wholly inconsistent with the Bible, then the paltry scraps that you're left with, you're right, don't contradict the Bible. Sadly, however, I'm not so sure that I or anyone else with a brain would find that terribly convincing. It would be kind of like saying London recently experienced some flooding. Now sure, you've got to gloss over the fact that it was in the wrong location, that it was the wrong time, and that it was the wrong size, but the Bible speaks of a flood.
There are cultures all over the world that have flood legends. I'm sure many of us have heard of the flood legends, the American Indians, the Fijians, Hawaiians, Eskimos, the Australian Aborigines.
Therefore, London's flooding proves that the Bible is correct about Noah's flood. But the amazing thing is, in reality, Ken Ham's position is almost that crazy.
If there really was a global flood that covered the highest hills under the whole of heaven, as the Bible describes, you'd expect to find billions of dead things buried in rock layers laid down by water all over the earth. And actually what we find are billions of dead things buried in rock layers laid down by water all over the earth. I'm talking about the fossil record. And if there was a global flood, you'd expect to find billions of dead things buried in rock layers laid down by water all over the earth. And you know what you find? Billions of dead things buried in rock layers laid down by water all over the earth.
Yeah, in order for Ken to make reality fit with the Bible, he's got to reduce the arguments to the level of fossils exist. Therefore, that confirms that the Bible was right about the global flood. You know, throwing out those really quite important details, like we know all of these fossils weren't laid down in one flood, for the simple reason that you never find any of the modern animals fossilized with ancient ones, you know, things like dinosaurs. That is, you never find a bunny with a brontosaurus. You never find a swan with a stegosaurus. You never find a tiger with a tyrannosaur. And you never find an elephant with an ankylosaurus. And for that matter, you never find a dolphin with an ichthyosaur. Never. Not once. And the reason that Ken's got to ignore this is because it shows that the Bible is utterly inconsistent with reality. So he does what creationists always do under these circumstances. He simply ignores everything that disagrees and reduces his argument to this level.
If there was a global flood, you'd expect to find billions of dead things buried in rock layers laid down by water all over the earth. Had to say that because a lot of our supporters would want me to. And what do you find? Billions of dead things buried in rock layers laid down by water all over the earth.
A point that's just so callow. It's like saying the Bible says that Jonah lived inside a fish for a few days, and science has shown that whales exist and they have stomachs. So science proves the accuracy of the Bible.
The Bible got it right about biology. Wow. Because it really is the Word of God. Now, you're getting more excited about being a Christian?
But seriously, the reason I have to throw out all of these critical details that we know about is for the simple reason that if you inspect those details, what you find is the Bible is simply inconsistent with reality. You know, like it does with this example of the Canidae.
By the way, that diagram is very, very similar to this diagram that creationists propose based upon the creation account in Genesis.
So we've got part number 42 coming up, and I'm looking forward to it. That was a good one, that one. All right, let's do it. Let's do it. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Oh, many thanks to everybody who supported Thunderfoot.
So Ray Comfort has a new movie out called Noah, which has chalked up over 1 million hits. And it looks like Ray is joining the End of the World is Nigh club.
While respected Bible scholars may disagree on the timing of some of these signs, they all agree on one thing, that Jesus Christ is coming again.
And then God said to me, "You are Messiah."
My name's Alan John Miller, but I'm actually Jesus. I remember all of the events of my crucifixion.
Certainly by no instruction from me, 2 witnesses, these 2, left their families, and it wasn't at my instruction or behest. It just occurred.
It's sworn in the Bible that it will occur. It will end, and so we have our heart set on that, on the promise that we were given, that this will happen.
So you're looking forward to that time?
Yes, with all my heart.
In other words, the things that happened in Noah's day will be similar to the things that are going to happen during the time referred to in the Bible as the end of the age.
We're at a point now where we are so certain that this will happen that we are ready to, you know, travel 18 hours, leave our jobs, whatever. We know.
In a moment, you're going to see clearly that the end of the age is happening now.
Seems that Ray thinks that there are prophecies in the Bible that are going to foreshadow the end times, like, for instance, the moon shall turn red as blood.
Here are 10 major biblical signs for which we are to look.
The sun shall be turned into darkness, and the moon into blood.
I'm a skeptic, so, you know, I like to believe, but I'm also a skeptic that believes also. So it could. I mean, you always see the moon change to different colors, obviously. It could turn to red.
In just over an hour, the full moon will turn a deep red for most of the planet.
Curiously, the words that Ray never mentions here are the words total lunar eclipse. It's kind of an important detail. And to show that we're living in the end times, Ray includes these incredibly useful interviews with people who obviously don't know that the Earth has a shadow and that the moon can move into that shadow. Or for that matter, that eclipses have been happening for the entire history of the Earth and moon.
Actually, I've seen the moon turn red before, and it has worried me. I was like, you know, what is this? What does it mean?
Freak you out?
It did freak me out.
In a moment, you're going to see clearly that the end of the age is happening now. How would you react if you saw the moon was red, blood red tonight?
I would be worried.
You'd be worried?
Yes, I would.
Why?
Well, in my physical condition, I would think, well, goodness gracious, there's something wrong. I think I need to run and hide and get underneath a rock.
And apparently he's managed to find people who don't seem to realise that the moon going into the Earth's shadow means that only light refracted through the Earth's atmosphere is going to get to the moon. The moon going red during a lunar eclipse is no more mysterious than the sky going red at sunrise, because it happens for exactly the same reason. That is, the biblical prophecy is quite literally as stupid as saying the signs that we're living in the end times is the sky will go red at sunrise and sunset.
The second sign we're looking at is found in Matthew chapter 24.
And there will be famines, pestilences, and earthquakes in various places.
You know, it takes a special brand of idiot to take something that has always been true and call it a prophecy, and then have people go, as if that's some sort of great divine wisdom. Look, let me show that I'm a prophet in that I prophesize that next year will start in early January, and that circles will be almost entirely round, and that someone driving a red car will forget their house keys. Seriously, these prophecies are by Jesus himself in the Bible, the supposed Son of God, and they're just so pathetically vague. I mean, where will these wars and earthquakes be?
And earthquakes in various places.
Well, I don't know about you, but I'm convinced.
Wow, earthquakes in various places. I mean, I can make better prophecies than God on this one. It's not just that there will be earthquakes in various places, they will be in specific places where there is tectonic movement, and they will continue as long as the tectonic movement continues. Seriously, did I just come out with far more accurate prophecies than the Son of God did in the Bible? Yeah, that should probably be a warning sign if someone can randomly make predictions off the top of their head that are more accurate and insightful than the God of the Bible. As in, maybe it wasn't a God in the Bible, but just some crazy cult leader.
Tonight, we'll take you inside the Messiah's isolated Queensland compound, where he's preparing his followers, including children, for the apocalyptic end of the world.
My first memories were having nails driven through my feet, and those memories began when I was just over 2 years of age.
Is it true that your mother tried to commit you to a psychiatric ward?
Yes, it is true. Yeah, and these are things that I knew would occur. My mum and dad in the first century followed me around, telling everybody I was crazy for most of my ministry.
But I wonder if there's another totally convincing way to convince people that the Bible is true. Hey, I know there's water on the earth, and the Bible says there was a flood of water. So the fact that there are oceans is a compelling reason why the Bible must be true, right?
The world is covered with water. Water doesn't dissipate. You know, that's what nature says. If evaporates, comes down, evaporates, comes down. Always stays the same. So if there's a worldwide flood, water should still be hanging around somewhere. Do you think 70% of the earth being covered in water is a good clue that there was a worldwide flood?
Oh, whoa. He makes a good point. That's an excellent point, actually.
No!
Oh, whoa. He makes a good point. That's an excellent point, actually. No. Yeah, I mean, it's clue. I mean, I have a raging clue that possibly that's an excellent point. Maybe it is a realization that the existence of a clue of a flood.
No, it's not. It really isn't. I mean, firstly, if you're going to state that water can't go anywhere, then wouldn't the expectation be that if the earth was completely flooded, then it would still be completely flooded? I mean, after all, the water can't go anywhere.
The world is covered with water. Water doesn't dissipate. You know, that's what nature says. If evaporates, comes down, evaporates, comes down. Always stays the same. So if there's a worldwide flood, water should still be hanging around somewhere.
Secondly, water is one of the most common molecules in the universe. The stuff is everywhere. I mean, most of the outer moons are made mostly of water. Take, for instance, Europa, where there's a 100% covering of water, mostly as ice, but probably with large oceans under the surface. Well, I guess that's just good evidence that God flooded Europa too. Right?
Oh, whoa.
He makes a good point.
That's an excellent point, actually.
Yeah. But let me just leave Ray Comfort with the words of wisdom of another man who claimed to be a modern-day Noah.
Well, you're a modern-day Noah.
Just giving everyone these words of wisdom of his interpretation of these ominous biblical signs, things that no man could explain, like how ominous it is that the sky goes red at sunrise and sunset.
Apocalypse is scheduled for Saturday.
The rapture is coming May 21st.
The Bible guarantees it.
Wake up, judgment is coming May 21. A week away. 6 days more, 5 days. 4 days. 3, 2, 1 day. If people want me to apologize, I can apologize. Yes, I did not have all of that worked out as accurately as I should have, or I wish I could have had it. That doesn't bother me at all, because I'm not a genius, and I pray all the time for wisdom.
Yeah. Salute to Thunderf00t at the end of every video. The man's a genius. Looking forward to this next one very much.
Did you know if you take the water out of the oceans, you will notice there is dirt underneath? There is. I mean, the oceans actually have a bottom. People say, do you think the continents were connected? I say, what do you mean? Were? They still are. It's just the low places are full of water, that's all. It's not like these are hollow, you know, it's hollow under here and they're floating around like lily pads in a bathtub, you know.
Brother Holtman, do you think, you know, the continents were ever connected? I say, well, they're still connected right now. They're always connected, you know. It's just the low places are full of water. You know, hello, it's not like lily pads floating around in a bathtub. Of course they're connected.
Actually, Kent, no. It's exactly like lily pads floating around in a pond. Exactly. And for the exact same reason. And no, the continents defined by the continental crust are no more touching than these lilies are touching. Look, you lifted this figure out of a book for teenagers and put it up whilst you were saying that the continents don't float around like lilies in a bathtub. Let's do something crazy. Let's read the caption to that figure, shall we? Continental crust is much lighter in weight, by which they actually mean it's less dense and thicker than oceanic crust. Yeah, Ken, I think your knowledge of Earth science would be vastly improved if rather than just telling everyone how you've taught it for years.
It causes earthquakes, volcanoes, you know, I've studied all that stuff, taught earth science for years.
If you'd have actually read some of those Earth science textbooks aimed at teenagers, or at bare minimum, just read the captions to the figures before you put them in your talk. You see, one of the first things you notice about the Earth is there's a sort of density gradient to it, that all the dense stuff is in the middle of the Earth and the less dense stuff on the outside. So iron on the surface has a density of about 8 grams per cubic centimetre. That's about 8 times the density of water. And that's mostly sunk to the middle, where with the added great pressure from being in the middle of the Earth, its density has been somewhat increased. And then you get outside of that iron core and you get onto the less dense sulfur and silicon rich stuff. And then as you move up towards the surface, you get onto the sort of rocky type materials, which have a density of about 3 grams per cubic centimetre. That's about 3 times the density of water. And then, of course, at the surface, you get stuff like water, which is a density of about 1 gram per cubic centimetre. And then above that, you have the atmosphere, which has a very low density, about 1,000th the density of water. But the pattern is bloody obvious, that the heavier stuff has sunk and the lighter stuff has floated, for exactly the same reason that rocks sink in ponds and lily leaves float. Indeed, there's only one group of people, stupid enough to propose that water should have been created underneath the rocks.
See, when God first made the world, the crust of the earth was stretched over. Most of the water that's now on top was underneath the crust of the earth. There were vast subterranean water chambers.
But God had a good reason for doing this. You see, God, being all-knowing, knew that the people that he created would disobey him, so he needed a way to kill them all.
After the curse, then, there was a flood. The Bible says in Genesis 6, God saw the wickedness of man, and his imaginations of his heart was evil continually. And it repented the Lord that he made man, and grieved him at his heart. And God said, I will destroy man, whom I have created, from the face of the earth. It repented me that I have made them.
And what better way of doing that than building in this natural disaster that would kill all of these people into his design?
I believe during the flood, the fountains of the deep broke open, and the water inside the earth came to the top. It talks about that in Psalm 24, Psalm 33, Psalm 136. Talk about water in the crust of the earth.
However, if you think this is crazy, he's just getting warmed up. You see, according to Kent here, God killed everyone because he wanted to leave nice, clear evidence that he killed everyone.
Some people have asked, well, hey, if God was mad at the world, why would he tell Noah to build a big boat? Why not just make everybody die? Can't God say, okay, I want everybody except Noah and his family to die? And they would die. God could do that. Why use a flood anyway? Why make Noah spend, who knows, some people say it took him 7 years to build the ark. Some people say 120 years. I don't think the scripture is clear on the topic. It took him a long time to build a boat that size. Why do that? Well, interesting. Things to consider about the flood. The flood left evidence. A miracle would not.
After all, what all-loving God wouldn't want everyone to know that the best solution that he could think of involved drowning every baby on earth. And of course, what God wouldn't want to leave a nice clear message, which is so clear that no one saw it for hundreds of years, and then it was corrupted by the devil.
And Satan knows this ought to draw people to say, wow, there was a flood, there was a disaster, this thing was buried quickly. And Satan has used very hard to deceive, he worked very hard to deceive people into thinking that the fossils that testify of God's judgment instead testify of millions of years.
Pro tip, Kent. Next time you pray to your God, tell him he needs to attend communications classes. You know, maybe learn how to use social media or send emails or something. Or let me put it another way. Designing people to disobey you so you can kill them seems needlessly sadistic and kind of redundant. Or maybe more to the point about how seriously Kent Hovind takes his religion. He has no problem, none whatsoever.
Excuse me, Thunderfoot. I got a question. If there was a flood and everybody was killed, okay, by this flood, and I've never heard this question actually asked before, and it just popped into my head to ask, where are the skeletons of all the people who were killed in the flood? Because, you know, bones, of course, as you know, as Kent Hovind has pretty much stated, you know, they sort of sink, or they are buried by the water. So we should have a layer of humans, and then we should have all the rest of them. You know, above that we should have all the dinosaurs and the animals and whatever came after the flood. Right? So we should be looking for skeletons of humans or animals or anything killed by the flood. Maybe, just maybe, Thunderfoot will illustrate that coming up. But let's see. It looks like the Pope's on his in his bulletproof Pope-mobile.
Whatsoever in proposing that God would commit an act of global genocide just to leave some evidence. But for some strange reason, he doesn't think that him merely spending 10 years in federal prison.
I just spent the last 9 years in federal prison over one of the dumbest laws ever passed in the history of humanity, structuring.
Was part of God's plan.
Hey. What's he like?
God? Lonely, but funny. It's got a great sense of humor.
The Bible promises, whosoever shall call upon the name of the Lord shall be saved. Whosoever shall call upon the name of the Lord shall be saved. The Bible says if you call upon the Lord, you shall be saved. So if you've asked the Lord to save you, He promised He'd save you.
I just spent the last 9 years in federal prison over one of the dumbest laws ever passed in the history of humanity.
But coming back to Kent and his argument that continents aren't like lilies. But many of you will say, okay, sure, rocks sink in water and lily leaves float on water. But water is a liquid and iron doesn't sink through rocks. Well, kinda. You see, rocks that we're used to seeing are not hot and they're not under a lot of pressure. The practical upshot is the rocks that we see don't flow, they're brittle and they crack under pressure. They don't flow. Now, clearly if you heat them up enough, they'll just soften and melt. And that one you can see very easily.
Oh my fucking God. Oh fucking Jesus. You have no idea how ridiculously small you look.
But what you can't so easily see is applying a lot of pressure has a very similar effect. It makes them squidgier to the point where you get down to the layer of the earth on which the earth's crust floats. That has a texture more similar to very, very, very thick treacle. I mean, let me just give you an example of this thick viscous flow stuff. If you take a glass of honey and put it in a pot of warm water such that it's being heated at the bottom and cooled at the top, if you just look at it in real time, it doesn't look like it's moving. So as you can see, the honey looks remarkably static. Yeah. And then below it, I've added a heat source, which is just some water, hot water. So what does our static honey look like in time lapse? But if you add a little more time into that, then all of a sudden you can very easily see the convection currents. And those are the convection currents which are moving around the tectonic plates. Now there are two basic sorts of crust. There's oceanic crust and continental crust. The continental plates are thicker and they're less dense. They float better than the thinner, less dense oceanic plates. To give you a rough perspective on this, the difference in density between the continental plates and the oceanic plates is comparable to the difference in density between ice and water. That is, the buoyancy of the continental crust in the oceanic crust is similar to the buoyancy of ice floating in water. So that's a glass of water. And ice cubes float really quite convincingly. So now it's stabilised a little. What you've got is these nice little convection cells where you actually see that the water is coming in contact with the ice. It's cooling down, which is making it denser, which of course means that it sinks. So you've got a convection cell going that way around, which is the sort of opposite of what we had with the honey, where it was actually being heated at the bottom, which of course was making it less dense, which was making it rise through the cooler, denser liquid. So that's basically what your convection cells in the Earth look like. Cool, eh? And now, the continents, you know, those areas defined by the thick, lower density continental crust are not touching.
Brother Hogan, do you think, the continents were ever connected? I say, well, they're still connected right now. They're always connected, It's just the low places are full of water. Hello, it's not like lily pads floating around in a bathtub. Of course they're connected.
It's just the low places are full of water, that's all. It's not like these are hollow, it's hollow under here and they're floating around like lily pads in a bathtub, The Earth has a solid crust, okay?
Not that that's particularly relevant, of course. It's just kind of amusing that a creationist trying to be clever ends up showing that he doesn't understand the basics of the system that he's trying to address.
So yes, the continents may be moving some, but that doesn't mean they were, Africa and South America fit. So what? My house and the neighbor's house would fit too if you took the street out of the way. So doesn't prove they used to be connected. It's just that the shape is pure coincidence.
Yeah, there's just one problem with that. There isn't a mid-Atlantic ridge between you and your neighbour's house where you can actually measure the rate of the spreading. That is, you can see the mechanism which causes the spreading of the continents. As for you and your neighbour's house being on opposite sides of the street, well, we know the mechanism that causes that too. People tend to build their houses on roads for access. We know the mechanisms that create these patterns. We can watch people building houses on opposite sides of the street, and we can measure the rate of spreading. We know the mechanism which causes it. I don't have to watch all the houses being built for the last 1,000 years to know that people building houses on roads for access is the mechanism which forms this pattern. We can actually see the evidence in the actual topographical maps of the ocean floor, and in the fact that most of the ocean floor is relatively new, only 100 or so million years old, and it gets newer as you get nearer to a spreading fault. While the continental crust, being more buoyant, has never really been subducted. You know, remember the ice cube example? The difference in density between water and ice is about the same difference in density between oceanic crust and continental crust. But to continue with that metaphor, yeah, the water might move around with convection currents, but those forces are not high enough to pull the ice cubes under. And that's very much the way it is with the convection currents on the Earth and the continental crust. There just isn't enough flow there to actually pull the continental crust down.
And the Earth is broken up into plates, and the plates are still moving a little bit, which causes earthquakes, volcanoes. You know, I've studied all that stuff, taught earth science for years. People say, wait a minute, isn't that proof of Pangea? No, that's not proof of Pangea. Textbooks say all the continents fit together. Well, that's baloney. They don't tell the kids, you know, the truth about this. This textbook says South America and Africa seem to be a perfect fit. That's a pure coincidence, folks, based on the water level.
Well, no, it's not based on the water level. It's based on the position of the continental crust. As for your claim that this oceanic spreading that we can observe is not evidence for plate tectonics, that's some pretty hardcore denial there. That's the sort of denial that would claim that Africa and South America don't actually fit. It's all lies in the textbooks.
The lies in the textbooks.
They had to shrink Africa by 40% just to get South America and Africa to fit. It's the God-honest creationist truth. And you know it must be true, because Kent Hovind did it himself. Isn't that right, Kent?
They don't tell the kids they shrank Africa nearly 40% to make them fit. If you cut it out on get a globe and cut Africa out, and then cut South America out and compare it to what they did in their textbook.
Whereas in reality, with the help of Google Earth, we find this.
Get a globe and cut Africa out, and then cut South America out and compare it to what they did in their textbook. They shrank Africa between 35 and 40%. The lies in the textbooks.
Dr. Hovind taught science for 15 years. Then he got his PhD in education. Hi, my name is Eric, and in this seminar called Lies in the Textbooks, you're going to find out some of those lies that are being presented.
In their textbook, they shrank Africa between 35 and 40%.
You know, there are many interesting and valid lessons of history to be learned from World War II, politically, militarily, and for me personally, most interestingly, technologically. However, invariably, people have almost no idea about any of this. Will just use comparing someone to Hitler as an insult, as a sort of placeholder for evil, leading to Godwin's law, that eventually anyone in an online argument will eventually compare the other person to Hitler. But here is probably the quickest and best example of Godwin's law on the internet. Take it away, Eric.
You know, people say evolution is not a bad philosophy, but at the same time, it was Hitler's religion during the Third Reich in Germany. Hi, my name is Eric.
Now that, my friends, is impressive. You've not even got to your name before you got to Godwin's law. You've not even got 8 seconds into the video before you're saying that Hitler's religion was evolution. There's just a few tiny problems with that, Eric. Firstly, the country from which the Nazis grew was, by almost any definition, a Christian country. So, for instance, when the civil servants pledged their allegiance to Hitler, this is how they did it. This was the oath of the civil servants. I swear I will be faithful and obedient to the leader of the German Empire and people, Adolf Hitler, to observe the law and to conscientiously fulfill my duties, so help me evolution. Oh, that's odd. They don't say, so help me evolution, they say, so help me God. Well, maybe it's just a typo or something, a poor translation or something like that. Let's see what someone who actually fought against the Germans in one of the most bloody and desperate battles in human history, that would be the Battle of Stalingrad, had to say about the Germans.
We took whatever we could get and we never felt bad about it. After all, the Germans had the words "God with us" engraved on their belt buckles. They were religious people.
Huh. God with us on their belt buckles, eh? Even more bizarre. Yeah, let's take a look at the SS, the worst of the worst, the guys who ran the death camps and so forth. Surely they didn't swear by God. They must have been the ones who swore by evolution, right? Right, Eric? So the SS oath came in 3 parts, and the first question was, what is your oath? And the answer was, I vow to you, Adolf Hitler, as Führer and Chancellor of the German Reich, loyalty and bravery. I vow to you and to the leaders that you set for me absolute allegiance until death, so help me God. Then part 2, so you believe in a God? To which the answer was, yes, I believe in a Lord God. And then the third part of the pledge, what do you think about a man who does not believe in a God? And then the answer was, I think he is arrogant, megalomaniacal, and stupid. He is not eligible for us. And that was the vow of the SS, Eric.
You know, people say evolution is not a bad philosophy, but at the same time, it was Hitler's religion during the Third Reich in Germany.
You know, Eric, I'm really not quite so sure I'm seeing that Hitler's religion here was evolution. But let's be real, it should come as a surprise to no one that Christians can slaughter innocent people and treat them like slaves, because that's exactly what Moses does in the Bible, specifically as commanded by God. So there's this big battle, and then after the battle, Moses comes and asks them, have you allowed all of the women to live? And then he goes on to say, now kill all of the boys and kill every woman who has slept with a man, but save for yourselves every girl who has never slept with a man. And then later, he goes on into dividing the spoils. And the Lord said unto Moses, you and Elijah, the priest, and the family heads of the community are to count all of the people and animals that were captured. Divide the spoils equally between the soldiers who took part in the battle and the rest of the community. From the soldiers who fought in the battle, set apart as a tribute to the Lord, 1 out of every 500, whether they be people, cattle, donkeys, or sheep. Take this tribute from their half share and give it to Elijah, the priest, as the Lord's part. Now, at this point you might be saying, well, you've got the Lord and Moses and Elijah. What's the relationship between them? Well, Moses is the guy who talks to God, and Elijah just happens to be his second son. I'm sure it's all just pure coincidence that the Lord wants all of this stuff to be given to Moses' kids. And what was the plunder of all of this, I hear you ask? Well, you'll be happy to know that the Lord's tribute was 675 sheep, 72 cattle, 61 donkeys, and 32 virgins. And Moses gave the tribute to Eliza. That's the Lord's part. Yeah, it's just what you would want if you had created the entire universe, is to have some battle fought among desert savages in some nowhere hick part of the world on one planet out of billions, going around one star out of billions, in one galaxy out of billions. And what did the God who supposedly created all of this get out of it? 61 donkeys and 32 virgins. Frickin' A. Yeah, shock and horror. The people whose holy book tells them to kill witches and stone adulterers can commit war crimes. From just killing captives who just happen not to be virgin women to hell. Just killing everyone.
Just kill them all.
Just how they behave in their holy book. Thus says the Lord of hosts, I remember that which Amalek did to Israel. And then the Lord goes on, now go and smite Amalek, and utterly destroy all that they have, and spare them not, but slay both man and woman, infant and suckling, ox and sheep, camel and ass. Yes, of course, people who can rationalize away crap like that in their holy book can run death camps. And honestly, Eric, I'm just really not seeing that there's any high moral ground for Christianity here whatsoever.
You know, people say evolution is not a bad philosophy, but at the same time, it was Hitler's religion during the Third Reich in Germany.
However, for those who want to learn probably the most important lesson about World War II, I give you this. But maybe the best insight you can get into this is that generals captured by the British were housed in a luxury estate and treated well. Actually, they talked to each other, and the British Secret Service clandestinely recorded it all. From this, you get a wart-and-all view of the workings of the Wehrmacht. You see it all, not as they wanted you to see it, but like it was.
When I am asked to testify, whatever I say, I intend to twist it in such a way that the officer corps is cleared of everything. I'm absolutely determined.
And then the captain says to the lieutenant, damn, I can't stand seeing these farmyard faces anymore. Takes out his revolver and shoots the farmer who he had personally invited over and blows him across the table. Now it's a 10-year-old boy's turn. The captain says, take him outside and shoot him. He was killed by a shot to the neck. I had them court-martialed. The captain just said, we didn't shoot any human beings. I asked for the death penalty for both of them, a public execution, shot by their own company. They were just sent to some punishment battalion.
We'd other things to worry about. What they did back there didn't matter to us. We just wanted to get out of it, alive.
In Serbia, I was ordered to have 100 people shot for every dead German, and 50 people for every wounded German. But I never carried out the order.
I had to do my duty. I couldn't say that seems wrong to me. I can't step out of line. You just can't.
That's just what the senior Wehrmacht officers failed to say with one voice. We refuse to take part in these atrocities. They are a disgrace to the name of Germany.
Sure, some of the lads may have shot people who put up their hands to surrender. But that was just the same on the other side.
The oath of allegiance applies as long as the Führer lives.
Do you consider the Führer mentally stable?
You cannot allow a subordinate to determine whether his superior is mentally intact or not.
Some of our soldiers, there are some in every unit, complete bastards, held nothing sacred. We had some.
Stauffenberg, now he always had
What a man. A noble, decent human being.
A man with principles.
The model of a decent, intelligent general staff officer. A man with the welfare of his troops at heart.
Most of the army knew about the 20th of July, you know?
No.
It was discussed incredibly often.
No, I don't believe that.
They even consulted the commanders of the individual armies beforehand.
What was at its core a professional army of a modern, educated, Western, Christian, first world country was ordered to do immoral things by a regime that they had helped, sometimes enthusiastically, to create, and how people, very little different from you or I, dealt with that situation. Sure, they bear their measure of blame for Hitler getting as far as he did. But bear in mind that Hitler did not run on a campaign of mechanized extermination of the Jews and war with Russia, but on patriotic messages of restoring Germany's former status. And by the time they were locked in a war of annihilation with Russia, the die was cast.
I believed her. I helped her. I did not see what she was.
Mr. Worf, villains who twirl their mustaches are easy to spot. Those who clothe themselves in good deeds are well camouflaged. But she, or someone like her, will always be with us, waiting for the right climate in which to flourish. Spreading fear in the name of righteousness. Vigilance, Mr. Worf. That is the price we have to continually pay.
So, what do you guys think so far? I'm loving it. Loving it. Loving it. Can't wait for the next one. Oh, by the way, we are on number 44. We're about to start number 45 out of 47. So we might actually give this a run until the end, because we're only 50 odd minutes, not even 52 minutes into it, going into the final one. So here we go. Let's do it, baby.
This might actually be worthy of a why do people laugh at creationists, because it's just so lulz-worthy. I mean, never underestimate the stupidity of people in large groups. And honestly, this makes my previous busted videos seem like small potatoes. You know, solar roadways, a paltry $2 million. Self-filling water bottles, 300,000. Hoverboards, another 300,000. The Ark encounter, $100 million.
And now his $100 million project takes advantage of millions of dollars in tax breaks. To work on the Ark encounter, job applicants have to sign a strict statement of faith, agreeing, for instance, that the Great Flood of Genesis was an actual historic event worldwide in its extent and effect.
And remember, they were going to compete with Disneyland. This was going to be the Christian version of Disneyland.
Imagine if we were to rebuild Noah's Ark. The size of the Ark, out of wood, to look like a real boat.
It's really time for Christians to do something of this size, of this quality, that competes with the Disneys and the Universals, to give a message to the world.
Its dimensions straight from the pages of Genesis.
It's meant to make a statement that Christians can build a major attraction like this.
But Ham knows this ship can sail. He predicts the Ark encounter will attract 1 to 2 million visitors in the first year alone.
I think we're going to see more people here than we ever dreamed possible.
Ham expects 2 million people to visit the attraction every year.
So as I upload this video, the $100 million Ark has been open for almost a year. And of course, there's no possible chance that God would let his most devoted creationists fail now, is there?
It does kind of have a Field of Dreams quality. If you build it, they will come.
Yes, we really do believe that if we build it, they will come.
Spoiler alert, they don't. But before we get to that, let's take a look at what you can learn at the Ark encounter. Yes, apparently one 600-year-old man.
On the 17th day of the second month of Noah's 600th year.
To actually build it in a biblical way is fantastic.
Made one of these ships about 4,000 years ago. And just to show it was possible, they used a labor force of not one man, but 1,000, and took 2 years. So that's give or take 2,000 man-years of labor. Or for another back-of-the-envelope calculation, you know the Ark cost $100 million to build. So if you make the first degree approximation that you're essentially mostly paying for labor in one way, shape or form, you know, even when you're buying materials, you're mostly paying for the labor of the person who made it. So for a typical US salary of $40,000 per year, you'd still be looking at over 2,000 man-years of labor going into this thing. And that's 2,000 man-years of modern labor, where they have first world infrastructure, you know, trucks to bring in the materials. A world where you essentially have to spend no time worrying about where your food's going to come from, and using power tools of almost every sort. Whereas, of course, in the biblical world, you would have spent most of your time trying to get enough food to not starve in winter. 2,000 man-years of labor using giant monster trucks and big-ass cranes so they could have an exhibit where an animatronic Noah tells you that it took him several decades to build the ark.
Took us several decades to build the ark. But that was after years of designing, collecting supplies.
So let's be generous and say 50. And let's give Noah the labor of all of his kids. You know, a workforce of about 10 or something. So he's getting about 10 years of man labor per year. So in 50 years, he would have had about 500 man-years of labor. And somehow they managed to build the ark with 1/4 of the manpower, using nothing but their hands, 4 times quicker than Ken Ham using 1,000 modern-day laborers with massive hydraulic cranes and so forth. Oh, bravo, Ken. That is definitely a joke worth $100 million creationist dollars. And of course, as they leave the ark, it's time to sell the rube something. Because in the Bible, of course, you'll remember that Jesus threw out the moneylenders from the temple, saying, "Make not my Father's house a house of merchandise."
As people exit the ark on the lower deck, they'll then go down a ramp into a very large gift shop.
A house of merchandise where you can buy all of Ken Ham's latest apologetics.
A very unique collection of gifts in here, including a large range of the basic creation apologetics books that Answers in Genesis produces.
Well, here I am on the roof deck of the biggest timber frame structure in the world.
The ark itself is basically standing on top of these concrete pillars. This massive boat is being held up.
Now, the religious folk had predicted, presumably after consulting with God, that the Ark encounter was going to be fantastic for local businesses.
It's been 7 months since the 510-foot-long Old Testament boat was launched on a Grant County prairie. Downtown Williamstown, which was expecting increased car and foot traffic, has almost as many empty storefronts as occupied storefronts.
What's it meant for downtown Williamstown?
Nothing.
Indeed, the local town provided some $60 million in bond for this.
I was one of these believers that when the ark came, it was just, everything's going to come in. Been here, it's not done it, Joe. It's not done it.
But for some strange reason, possibly Ken not praying hard enough, it doesn't seem to have happened.
The ark's success has not had the ripple effect many hoped it would. Grant County is teetering on the edge of bankruptcy.
Now, the main reason for this, of course, is that nobody's turning up for the Ark encounter. Early on, they were predicting they would get about 2 million visitors a year. That's about 5,000 people per day.
Ham hopes for 2 million visitors in the first year,
which they reckon they got on the opening week. But even at that, you can tell just from the car lot size in the cars, this wasn't exactly a raging success. Hell, even the pictures taken by Answers in Genesis were taken to conceal the fact that there's an entire empty car lot. You know, the one that the drone's hovering over. And that was opening weekend. Hell, even by their own numbers, they're 3/4 the way through their first year, their big year. And they've only had about 600,000 visitors.
A staffer said they have had about 645,000 to date.
That puts them on target for getting less than 1 million visitors in the first year, if they're lucky, and assuming they're being honest about their numbers.
Looking at the bookings for the future and looking at the group bookings, I would say we're well on target to hit our minimum of 1.4 million up to 2.2 million as the research has suggested.
Yes, honestly, if that's opening weekend, it's not quite drawing the crowds. Now, sure, part of this might be that creationists cannot live on faith alone, and so entry for an adult into the park is about $40 and $30 for a kid.
Of the Ark costs $42. $42 to get in.
Which means for a family of 4, you'd be looking at about $150 just to go see the Ark encounter.
And they spared no expense on incredible restrooms.
Then, of course, there are folks who have actually turned up and videoed the queuing area, which seems a little over-designed for the actual number of people who were turning up.
Nobody here. So they got all sorts of video screens down here in the queue area. I guess they expect quite a few people because this is a pretty large queue, but they got a nice sound system.
So below the Ark is this very large queue, which really is not, there's not a lot of people in the queue line. And
we also have a 1,500 seat restaurant.
So here we are at the Ark Park dining room. It's just after noon on Thursday, and you can see the place is completely empty. Nobody's here.
Not quite the big draw they'd been praying for. Now, before all of this, Ken seemed rather open to the idea of inviting atheists to come.
Ham hopes for 2 million visitors in the first year.
And scoffers and critics be damned.
Well, they can scoff all they want. They can be critical all they want. You know what? I invite them all to come here.
However, later on, there seems to have been a change of heart about this.
I get to go backstage?
So video in the exhibit's not allowed.
In what exhibit?
Any of them. Any of the ones with video or whatnot. So you need to go ahead and delete the footage that you took off of the
Yeah,
videos.
that's not going to happen. This is a telephone.
Yes, sir, I understand.
And there's a lot of people taking video, and you're pulling me out?
They're not taking video.
Yes, they are. I was just talking to people.
Sir.
Okay, I am back in my truck. They escorted me off the property, put me in a police car, and drove me about 1 mile back to my truck.
And yes, this was their first year, which should have been their big year. You know, opening weekend stuff. So why would Ken kick an atheist out of the park, I hear you ask? Well, apparently he thinks that God's plan for the Ark encounter has been derailed by unfavourable coverage by atheists. Recently, a number of articles in the mainstream media, on blogs and well-known secularist group websites have attempted to spread the propaganda to brainwash the public into thinking the Ark encounter is a dismal failure. Incidentally, Ken, I'd lay off words like propaganda and brainwashing if I were you.
Next time somebody says millions of years ago, what do you say to them? Were dinosaurs on the Ark? On what day of creation were dinosaurs made? 6th day. Can you add millions of years into the Bible? No. If there really was a global flood, what would you expect to find? Billions of dead things buried in rock layers, laid down by water all over the earth. But what happens when somebody says millions of years? Oh, were you there? Well, I think we've thoroughly taught you.
Sadly, they are influencing business investors and others in such a negative way that they are preventing Grant County, Kentucky from achieving the economic recovery that its officials and residents have been seeking. Yes, apparently atheists laughing at all the dinosaurs on the Ark encounter.
Put your hand up if you agree dinosaurs went on Noah's Ark. That's great.
Here's the thing, 46% of Americans believe the story of Genesis is true.
The Why the Bible is True exhibit.
The Ark Encounter's newest exhibit, a graphic novel version of the Christian message called Why the Bible is True.
So, taking God at his word in Genesis, dinosaurs lived beside people about 6,000 years ago. And the Bible tells us that there was a global flood and 2 of every kind of land-dwelling, air-breathing animal went on board the boat that Noah built.
Do you believe that Noah took one of these onto the Ark?
Well, the Bible says Noah took 2 of each kind.
It seems like if you took one of those on board, everything else might as well stay home.
Yes, apparently the unfavourable coverage of the secularists was enough to completely scupper God's plans, to scupper the plans of the most powerful being in the universe. Well, I guess that is actually kind of biblical, seeing as the God of the Bible couldn't even overcome people with iron chariots.
And I'm also amazed too at the way in which God has brought together hundreds of talented people in a miraculous way to make this happen.
All right, so it looks like we are coming up. There's two more parts to go. We are just gone an hour in.
Had to make signs to wake up the church.
Let's see what's coming.
I don't think we could get more of a sign. This is more than any generation that we have seen.
Okay.
More than any other generation we've seen. Strap yourselves in, Dorothy, because prophecy is coming to America, and in a form where he reckons that this is what America might end up like in 5 or so years' time. And this is from a video with well over 1 million hits, and copies with well over 1 million hits, and an approval rating of about 95%.
We're going to talk about signs. All right, the subject today is sign. We're going to talk about the American solar eclipse. So the sun is a sign, the moon is a sign. How so? Let's take a look at this. Do you realize that a total solar eclipse is only possible on Earth? No other planet that we know, certainly no planet that we're aware of in the solar system, can experience a total solar eclipse.
Really? Is that so? You know, because I'm pretty sure I've seen total solar eclipses on Jupiter. Hell, there are 17 Io eclipses every month on Jupiter. That's over 200 per year. And that's just one of the Jovian moons. You get another 100 total solar eclipses from Europa per year, 50 for Ganymede and a mere 20 for Callista. So that total solar eclipses are only possible on Earth. Not quite true, because on Jupiter they're almost a daily occurrence. You know, happening on average about once per day. Cool, so let's briefly touch on what an eclipse is. Basically, with any planet, it goes around the sun in a plane, and if it's got a moon, that goes around the planet in a plane. And so, at times where those planes intersect, and a little bit either way, is a place where the sun, the moon, and the planet can align. And when that happens, you get an eclipse. So this is actually what the 2017 total solar eclipse would have looked like from space. And all in, it takes about an hour for the moon's shadow to cross the Earth. So you can see, it's hardly a sign of divine judgment or something. It's just a moon going around the Earth and happening to pass in front of the sun. Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto all have moons. And the only one of them not to have total solar eclipses is Mars. And even at that, it's marginal.
Do you realize that a total solar eclipse is only possible on Earth?
Yeah, Jupiter gets gazillions of total solar eclipses. Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, not so much, because the orbital plane of the planet and those of the moons have to align. But when they do, they get loads of total solar eclipses. Indeed, with Pluto, I remember this when I was young, Pluto entered this part of its orbit where it started getting these mutual total solar eclipses with Charon. And it was the light curves from that were used to construct a crude map of the surface of Pluto, which at the time couldn't actually be resolved by any telescope. And then later on, of course, we got the Hubble Space Telescope, and later on still the New Horizons probe.
No other planet that we know, certainly no planet that we're aware of in the solar system, can experience a total solar eclipse. Why is that? Because the sun's diameter is 400 times larger than the moon's, but at the same time, the sun also happens to be 400 times farther away than the moon.
Dear God, no. The only thing that is required for a total solar eclipse is that the eclipsing body is angularly larger than the sun, as I will demonstrate here with Io going around Jupiter. This is why almost all the bodies further away from the sun get so many total solar eclipses, because the sun at that distance is so angularly small. But even at this, he fails. If the sun was exactly 400 times further away and 400 times bigger, then the total solar eclipse would only and always last for 0 seconds. The fact that they last between 0 and up to about 8 minutes is primarily because the moon's distance from the Earth varies as it goes around the Earth. Not by a little either, by about 40,000 kilometers. The sort of precision you only get in biblical prophecies. And given the moon's distance is about 400,000 kilometers away, it's about 250,000 miles. That's about the mileage that you could get out of a good car before it kicks the bucket. This means that the moon's size varies by about 10%. And when the moon is closer to the Earth, you get a total solar eclipse. And when it's further away, you get annular solar eclipses.
Now, as I said to you, the Hebrews, every one of their letters means something. Each letter has a gematria value, and it also has a picture, a concept associated with it. Well, the last letter of the Hebrew alphabet is Tav. And the letter, or this letter, is associated with the image of a sign. It means a sign. And guess what? Its gematria value is 400. You can't make this stuff up.
Yeah, that's a great story. Amazing even. And like you say, you just can't make this stuff up, except, yeah, you totally made this stuff up. Yeah. The distance between the Earth and the moon varies by about 10%. So the ratio of the Earth-Sun to Earth-Moon distance varies from about 375 to 408. 375 to 408. Because, like you're saying, it's there in the Bible, the letter Tav, which has a gematria value of between 375 and 408, because it's not numerology.
A sign includes things in the sky and gematria, biblical gematria, not some strange numerology. Now, I bet you nobody here who's a non-Jew would be convinced of that. You'd be like, oh, that's just numerology, especially Christians these days. Christians do not even pay attention to the signs that the Bible is talking about.
Now, it has to be said that the ratio of the diameter of the moon to the diameter of the sun is a pretty good 400. It's there within about 1 part per thousand, that sort of thing. We'll call that biblical precision for the moment. Well, do you know where else the number 400 crops up in the solar system? Uranus is exactly 400% bigger, within the biblical precision that we were talking about earlier, than the Earth.
There is no coincidence with God. It's a God incident.
Uranus. Yeah, where you pulled out all of the source material for your video.
That's a sign. On the 4th day, he made that sign. He gave it a value 400. Unless you knew astronomy 3,000 years ago, why would you say that a sign has the numerical value 400? Because the person who made the Hebrew alphabet made the sun. That's our God. This is why what we're believing, what we're reading, it's not something made up. It's not another religious text. It's not another man-made fiction. It's something that is objectively true.
Hell, what's being suggested here is just geometrically impossible. I mean, let's just say it was a perfect 400 at first contact. That means by mid-eclipse, of course, because the Earth is a ball with radius about 6,000 kilometers, it's going to be closer to the moon. So it basically goes with the ratio of the distance to the moon, which is basically 400,000 kilometers plus or minus 6,000 kilometers. That's 1%. So much for biblical precision.
Now, we want to come to another sign. Something that the Jews would consider a sign in the sky, which is the total solar eclipse that is going to cross the United States mainland on the 21st of August, 2017. We are only days away from this.
Yeah, he's totally going to predict that the moon's shadow is going to destroy things. The shadow. Never mind the fact that there have been over 10,000 solar eclipses that have happened in the last 5,000 or so years. This is the significant one, I tell you. This is the one God's going to try and use to communicate with us.
What keeps people away from Jesus? They're dishonest. They're dishonest about who they are. They think they're better than other people. They think they're smarter than God. They think God is wrong and they're right.
Well, I'm not sure about God, but I'm certainly a lot smarter than his spokesman. You know, the ones who think that solar eclipses can only happen on Earth.
All right, the Bible says that the sun is a sign. The sun is a sign. There are unique things about the sun, probably more than we can figure out, but we've, I think, touched on one of them. The solar eclipse is a sign. What else might be a sign? Well, here's an interesting thing. What do you think is the temperature of the surface of the sun? Anyone know?
Well, I'm not sure. What units do you want to measure this in? You see, the Bible's a little sketchy on temperature measurements. Not greatly surprising, seeing as the thermometer wasn't invented to some 1,000 or so years after Jesus supposedly died.
Maybe something that the ancients, they're ignorant, they don't know anything, and they paid attention to that. Actually, we find a lot of times they know more than we do. We just forgot what they knew.
Well, most Americans, which you're later going to tell us is the new Babylon, would like the temperature in Fahrenheit. Most everyone else in Celsius. And scientists on their nerdier days would probably go for Kelvin. So why are you interested in the temperature of the sun?
Well, here it is. It says the surface temperature of the sun is 5,778 Kelvin. Now, that's a very interesting number because...
Or 5,505 Celsius or 9,941 Fahrenheit.
The next Hebrew year is 5,778. That's coming 1 or 2 days before the Revelation 12 sign. So 5778 roughly equals our 2018. Is that a coincidence? Or is that a sign? God loves to play with words and images and numbers, and he can do what he likes. Yeah?
Oh, prophecy. You want the temperature in Kelvin, so you can claim this is all prophecy. Well, firstly, no. According to NASA, the temperature of the surface of the sun is 5772 Kelvin, not 5778. Which means your prophecy of the Earth ending should have happened 6 years ago. I mean, you all remember the Earth ending 6 years ago, right? I mean, look, let's just take a big picture look at this. The sun is giving out about twice as much radiation as it did when the Earth first formed. Not only that, the sun is a weakly variable star, so the surface temperature won't be constant in any event. Then, of course, it depends on what you call the surface, how you define it. The sun's got several layers, going from the photosphere, which is about 6,000 Kelvin, to the thin corona, just a few hundred kilometers from the surface, where the temperatures go up to about 1,000,000 Kelvin.
So he said, I'll give you, the evil ones, the sign of Jonah. Now, who was he speaking to? The wicked, the evil, the legalistic, the Pharisees. And so we say, what's the sign of Jonah? Well, Jonah ran away from the call of God, was eaten by a fish, really actually died inside the fish, was resurrected after 3 days, and the fish spat him out.
Seriously, Jonah, the guy who was swallowed by a fish.
No! Or you do what exactly? Hit me with that fish.
Honestly, I think you were doing better, but there are no other places in the entire universe that can have total solar eclipses.
There was a sign given to Nineveh called the sign of Jonah. What was that sign? Take a look at it. Today, Nineveh is called Mosul, so there's Mosul right there. And there was a total solar eclipse that crossed the north of Nineveh on the 15th of June, 763 BC, during the reign of King Ashur-dan III. This was one of the omens which led Nineveh to repent wholesale.
So the sign that was given to Nineveh wasn't actually in Nineveh. They didn't have a total solar eclipse. Dude, it's right on the map you're putting in front of all those people. The line of totality misses Nineveh. I mean, what, they not read it or something? Oh wait, I think I might have an explanation for this.
The last letter of the Hebrew alphabet is Tav. Everyone say Tav. Tav, Mazel Tov. Everyone say Mazel Tov. For signs, would you like to say signs? Everyone say sign. Say, what's going on? And the ancients were not so dumb. Dubbed the Bur-Sagal eclipse. It was one of the most famous solar eclipses in ancient history.
Except it didn't turn dark. I'm beginning to think that your God's really not paying attention to the details of these signs.
You know what happened when Jesus was crucified? The sun turned to darkness. The Bible records it.
Yeah, but no one else. Odd that. Hell, the nearest you get is an eclipse happened about 2 years after Jesus supposedly died. And the Bible says it was dark for hours. A neat trick, seeing as the longest total solar eclipse that you can get is about 8 minutes. And the eclipse some 2 years after Jesus supposedly died was only about a minute long.
But don't discount the fact that the sun turned to darkness. Day turned to darkness, which confirmed for those Pharisees who were watching at that time. Didn't he say something about the sign of Jonah? And when Jesus is crucified, the earth quakes, day turns to night.
Yeah, except the only place that says this is the Bible. Odd, you would have thought that earthquakes and the sun going out for 3 hours and the dead coming out of their graves and coming into town for a day trip. Yeah, that's actually in the Bible. You would have thought that that's the sort of thing that some contemporary historians might have thought worthy of note. You know, my long-dead Uncle Bertie came into town today. I said I thought he was dead. And he said, yeah, but, Jesus died, and so now I'm the living dead. He went on to say that this was a really unexpected career change for him, and how heaven had actually been really cool, and that he was very nonplussed to be an undead zombie for the foreseeable future. I mean, as he asked me, how do you die if you're already dead? Oddly, the Bible, after making these remarkable claims about the dead coming back to life and visiting people, oddly something that's not mentioned in any other text of the time, doesn't see fit to say what happened to the undead after this.
Can you see the series of earthquakes that are going on right now? Turkey and Greece, unusual earthquake, a mini tsunami went into the hotels in Turkey. At least 2 people dead in Greece. More to come.
Wow. 2 dead in an earthquake. No zombies yet, but still, 2 dead. I mean, ignore the fact that there are about 1 million people who die in car accidents every year. That's about 3,000 people per day. But sure, 2 dead in an earthquake, that's a sign from God.
The sign of Jonah included at least 5 things. When you trace the history of the reign of Ashur-dan III, you find that there were a series of plagues, civil wars, military loss, a major earthquake, and a total solar eclipse.
What? Look, when most people want to give a sign, they'll settle for a box of chockies and some sweet talk. What sort of a psycho, when he wants to communicate with you, communicates by sending you plagues, wars, and solar eclipses?
What we've got here is failure to communicate.
If you look right now in America, it's almost like there is a civil war that's about to start. The division between people in America is almost 50-50, right down the line. It's never really had that kind of division since 1865, the Civil War.
You mean it's completely unprecedented that America has never been more divided than this? Except, of course, when they were so divided they actually had a civil war. But for some reason, you're not going to call that a sign.
And I think that there's going to be an earthquake and maybe an upset military loss for America as well, and plagues.
What? What? America is in for a plague? Dude, the only plague America is struck with is too many hamburgers. And even at that, life expectancy in America has never been so high. As for a military loss, wow, that's an incredible prediction. I mean, America's only been at war for 93% of the time of its 250-year history. I mean, any other great predictions you got there? You know, the year's going to start in early January, or water's going to be kind of wet, or milk left out of the fridge for too long won't taste as nice. Yeah, Nostradamus, keep making those powerful predictions.
What kind of signs does God give? On the 21st of August 1914, a total solar eclipse crossed Eastern Europe. This was dubbed at that time the World War I eclipse. World War I started 2 months prior to the solar eclipse with the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand on the 28th of June 1914.
Boom. There you go. Eclipse. And all of a sudden, World War. Solid argument there, dude. Solid argument. I mean, I can see you're really going somewhere with this one. I mean, all right, you're a bit shaky at the beginning, but now I can see you're really going strong on this one.
And when war started, it started there on the Eastern Europe front. And when it started 2 months into it, day turned to darkness. If they understood the signs of God, they should have just laid down their arms and said, this is going to be a waste of lives and time and money.
What? Dude, remember, you were just saying that your God was the one who communicates by starting wars.
And when war started, it started there on the Eastern Europe front. And when it started 2 months into it, day turned to darkness.
Great. So solar eclipses precede world wars. I mean, we got it here. So, of course, there's going to be a solar eclipse, lots of solar eclipses just before World War II, all over Europe, right? You know, the bloodiest war in human history. Well, no. Turns out there weren't any, which kind of blows the crap out of this conspiracy theory.
Now, this is the map of the eclipse path of totality going across the United States, as I mentioned, on August 21st, 2017.
Oh my God, that's terrifying. Just look at the shadow going all the way across America. That's never happened before.
So 1716 UT time, that's universal time. This will overlap the Cascadia subduction zone. And what's interesting about this, two things. First of all, that it starts by crossing an earthquake zone.
Actually, the eclipse starts in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, thousands of miles away from this Cascadia subduction zone. And even at that, basically the whole west coast of America is a fault line. So any eclipse that makes landfall on the west coast of America crosses a subduction zone. Further, what the hell? It's almost impossible for the moon's shadow to go across the Earth without crossing loads of earthquake zones. And in any event, what's the point here? That God is going to communicate by only killing people in earthquake zones, because that's where God can cause earthquakes?
Also, the final Hebrew month, Elul, begins at sundown on which day? Monday, the 21st of August, 2017. What's Elul about? Here it is. Wikipedia says Elul is the 12th month of the Jewish civil new year. It comes from the Akkadian word, they say, that means harvest.
It certainly does. Because you know what? People tend to grow crops in the summertime and then harvest them in autumn time. You know, maybe sort of late August when this eclipse just happened to happen. Yeah, muppet. Yeah, sure, it means the end times and that God's going to come back and harvest people.
So the solar eclipse happens at the 1st of Elul, which means the harvest begins. The word harvest means gathering of crops, ripened crops, a supply of anything gathered at maturity and stored. The verb to harvest means to gather, to reap, to catch, to take, to remove. How interesting.
Oh yeah, that's truly remarkable that an eclipse should happen in autumn. You know, at harvest time.
there appears a marker on the Earth. Right? At the end of 2017, the Great American Solar Eclipse. So this is going to darken the Earth. It's actually going to...
Like this eclipse on the 21st of August, 49 BC. Or this one on the 21st of August, 3 BC. Or this one on the 21st of August, 16 AD. Or this one on the 1st of Elul in the year 491. Or this one on the 1st of Elul, year 576. Or this one on the 1st of Elul, 1650. Or whatever. I think you get the point that there's nothing special about August 21st and eclipses.
Kind of mark out a path of maybe this is where God's focus is. America, time to repent or be judged.
Yeah, that's right. America is about to be judged because of the moon's shadow. I mean, sure, all those 10,000 solar eclipses or so that have just been in the last few thousand years. That wasn't God's judgment. But with this solar eclipse, I feel lucky that this is the one that God's going to use to communicate with America.
So the last time that a total solar eclipse crossed the United States was in 1918, June 8th, 1918.
Well, not entirely. There was the annular eclipse of 1994 that crossed the entire United States. There were the total solar eclipses of 1979 and 1970. There were the total solar eclipses of 1959, 1954, and 1945 that all originated in America. Then there was the total solar eclipses of 1934, 1925, and 1923, all of which crossed America, as well as the annular eclipse of 1937 and 1932. But whatever, tell me more about the 1918 eclipse.
So now we want to move towards prophecy / an educated speculation. How do we determine, how do we say what might be coming? Because we want to prepare people. What might be coming? Well, all we have to do is look at history. History is prophecy. What happened in history when there was a total solar eclipse crossing the entire continental United States nearly 100 years ago?
The end of World War I? Is that the sign that you're talking about? Oh, sorry, I forgot. God only communicates by killing people. You know, signs. Go on, tell us more.
Well, if you look in history, you can Google this. 1918, there was a flu pandemic. A pandemic is bad. It's not an epidemic, it's a pandemic. The pandemic of 1918 resulted in a death toll of 675,000 Americans dead. The death toll worldwide was 50 to 100 million. I mean, give or take 50 million. That's how bad it was.
So let me see if I understand this right. God wants to send a sign that he's going to judge America. So he sent a global pandemic to kill 50 to 100 million people, even though only 1% of the dead would be Americans. You know, the people he's trying to communicate with. Meanwhile, 99% of the casualties would be a splatter fire.
So would you say that's a sign that was given to that generation? To say, boy, there's a lot of wickedness here and repent?
Cool. So I'm sure if we take a look at another plague, say for instance the Black Death, I'm sure you'll find that was accompanied by a solar eclipse too. Actually, no. That was just 1/3 of the population of Europe dead without an eclipse. Good thing too. I would hate to see how bad it would have been if God had tried to communicate with these people by sending them a sign at the same time.
Repent or reap what you sow. God doesn't go around killing people. We don't believe that. But God would only need to remove his presence for evil to come into your life.
I'm really not so sure I would call influenza evil. It's a virus. Sure, it kills you, but it's not like it sat there conspiring to do it. You know, oh, if only God will remove his presence, then I can go and kill women and children. Well, God's just sitting there saying, well, yeah, I think I'm going to remove my presence till 50 to 100 million are dead, you know, because that'll teach him not to do what I want.
That's what we're doing to God. We kick him out of school. We say you can't even teach the Bible in school. You can see the demonic influence in that.
Not teaching the Bible is demonic. Dude, I'm glad that you're talking crap. Because if your God really was real, and this is how he communicated, how could you distinguish him from the devil?
The death toll worldwide was 50 to 100 million. I mean, give or take 50 million. God doesn't go around killing people. We don't believe that. But God would only need to remove his presence for evil to come into your life.
Yeah, don't do what I want and I'll let 50 million die just to teach you a lesson. That sounds pretty evil to me.
Why would you single out a book and say that's not allowed? But of course you can glorify Islam. You can talk positively about the Quran.
What planet are you on? The one that doesn't have any solar eclipses or something? Islam is pretty much synonymous with evil in America. And you'll be doing very well to find anyone who will defend it because it's got so much messed up stuff in it. Not that that should be much of a surprise. You basically both worship the same God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob.
But I want to show you something else that might be a clue. If you look at the path of totality of the eclipse, and then you look at this earthquake hazard map, which is put out by the USGS, this is FEMA's projected earthquake damage zones. The red would be the worst. Yellowstone's there, New Madrid's there, and the sun marks it out. On the 21st of August, the sun says, we're crossing all of those earthquake zones.
Yeah, you've got a pretty good eye of faith there, dude. Because it looks to me like it's just a line going across America. So let's see. It misses all of Alaska, all of Hawaii, goes through the lowest earthquake damage zone on the west coast, then clips the New Madrid place before going out and missing Puerto Rico completely. Yeah, if only shadows cause earthquakes, we would be completely screwed. Yeah, really do. You've never looked at an eclipse prediction map, have you? Or a historical one for that matter. You know how hard it is for an eclipse not to pass an earthquake zone.
And by the way, this is also partially scientific because a lot of the geologists, they never can predict earthquakes because they look down. God always says look up. There are now scientists who are looking up at solar activity, sunspots, coronal hole mass ejections, these things. And then they make predictions of earthquakes, and so far they have been doing it better than people who look down.
Enough, goddammit! Okay, not quite yet. But if you want to know just how dumb what this guy said was, you're going to have to tune into the next episode of Why Do People Laugh at Creationists, because believe it or not, I'm only about halfway through this guy's talk, which I should remind you had over 1 million hits and a 95% positive rating, which kind of echoes what I saw when I drove around America this summer. Some 8,000 miles. America's prime problem is not the regressive left with people like Sarkeesian. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that addressing those people isn't fabulously entertaining. And sure, when she was in front of the United Nations, necessary. But now she pulls in a few thousand hits per video, and in some cases less than 1,000, which means that less than 0.5% of her subscribers actually watch her stuff. And most of those are probably just watching it for the lulz. And she's the monster fish, the giant of the social justice warrior community. Meanwhile, this is the religious right, who can field a video with over 1 million hits, multiple videos like this, with huge approval ratings, who want this sort of stuff taught in schools, to kids, to the next generation. And yet, while in America, I saw several people like this echoing this bullshit.
I mean, this 400 thing is just crazy. I mean,
the fact that we get any eclipse at all totally disproves evolution.
Every moon in the solar system, with the exception of those on Mars, causes eclipses.
Nope, that's not true.
Absolutely, it's true. I watched them. I videoed them.
They all call it
all of them.
Not all of them, but yeah, I mean, no, the eclipses on Jupiter, they're like a couple of nights. Yeah,
showers.
No. They have potato moons. They're only partial. They're terrible. The point is
they're total eclipses. They're total eclipses. All you need
is a potato moon.
No, all the ones, all the four big ones.
Galilean.
Yeah, Io, Europa, Ganymede, Callisto,
the point is,
Titan,
this is the only place in the universe
Triton.
that you can live and study the universe.
Well, this is the only place.
It's a miracle. I'm saying
this is the only place with
Christ.
life, so it's all a tautology that this is the only place. Right?
I guess what I'm saying is this is not some niche drama for clicks type bullshit. This is the roughly 40% of Americans who think that Jesus will return in the next 40 or so years. And if you like media like this and want to support it, you'll find the links to Patreon below.
Wow, 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 wow. Everybody, this is unfucking believable. Alright, I think what I'm going to do is, instead of, excuse me, but instead of playing all the way through to the end of Thunderfoot segments, I think I'm going to stop it right here for this one. And it looks like we'll have 2 to go on the next round. And to keep you even in more suspense, it looks like this dude that he's been mocking, ridiculing, criticizing, tearing apart, and debunking is going to be there will be a continuation of much the same ripping apart of this of that speaker. So yeah, looking very forward to it. Again, a tribute to Thunderfoot for great job. I mean, this one we watched was done within a year. The first ones we watched were done 10 years ago. Thunderfoot, you're awesome. You are awesome, dude. Oh, I need to tell you that although it hasn't been used very much, definitely not today, I do have an outside YouTube chat. Let me just slide it in here. We've got an outside YouTube chat to which you can, while we're live anyway, you can contribute. I keep an eye on it every now and again. Obviously today, no one was really watching the live bit. So I'll just cut back here and say, yeah, that's it. Yeah. We will be back with the last 2 segments of Thunderfoot's Why Do People Laugh at Creationists next time. It has been a pleasure presenting Sapiostream for you today. Thank you so much for watching. Stay tuned. Please subscribe and click on Get Notifications.